Right. First of all, ladies and gentlemen, can I just say a huge thanks to everyone that's turned up today. Unfortunately, we don't ever get a mention on the MSM, unlike Extinction Rebellion or Just Stop Oil. But look, we keep going. And just like during lockdowns, remember when the lockdowns first started, there was a handful of people out? Well, guess what? There's a handful of us out now, and I can guarantee you all, the next thing they want to do is they want to take us to war. So I want to tell you about why we're here today, and especially outside the US Embassy. So, as the dust settled on the rubble of Europe, there was a world order was set up. And then I want to read out the names of these countries. Korea, 1950. Vietnam, 1955. Laos, 1959. Indonesia, 1958. Lebanon, 1958. Cuba, 1961. Dominica, 1965. Korea, 1966. Cambodia, 1967. Lebanon, 1982. Grenada, 1983. Libya, 1986. Iran, 1987. Panama, 1989. Iraq, 1990. Somalia, 1992. Bosnia, 1992. Haiti, 1994. Kosovo, 1998. Afghanistan 2001, Yemen 2002, Iraq 2003, Pakistan 2004, Somalia 2007, the Indian Ocean 2009, Libya 2011, Uganda 2011, Syria 2014, Niger 2018, then Ukraine in 2022. You know what they all have in common? They are all countries the United States has either invaded, bombed or attacked. The US policy over the last decades has been built on the power of the American military and the dollar. But I'm telling you right now today, all of it is coming to an end because you know what they've done? They have abused the power. They have abused what they have been given. And then we're going to talk more slightly about Ukraine. People say that, oh, we need to stop Putin or else he'll be like Hitler and he'll take over the whole of Europe. Well, you know what? It's illiterate. The way the media speak to us, they talk to us like they're 5-year-olds. Because I want to go back to what this is really more like. It's more like the US intervention in Vietnam. And this is the other problem we have. People don't remember from history. Did you know that the entire war in Vietnam was built on a lie? It was a complete lie. Yet we're supposed to believe things don't happen. There's been troops and military build-up since the 1950s. And the 2nd of August 1964, the USS Maddox was in the Gulf of Tonkin Straits. They said it was attacked by the Vietnamese, and then 2 days later there was another attack. What was then given was the Gulf of Tonkin Resolution. It then came out in the 2000s, the whole thing was made up. The pretext for the war in Vietnam was built upon a lie. The Gulf of Tonkin Resolution gave Lyndon Johnson the power to put all troops as necessary to defend American interests. And it was a lie. There was no attacks. They lied about it. They used it as a pretext for war. Do you know what the Americans did when they were in Vietnam? They dropped 5 million tons of weapons, double what they dropped during World War II. They dropped 400,000 tons of napalm. They dropped 19 million gallons of toxic herbicide. Do you know what the death toll in Vietnam was? 882,000 dead, 655,000 men, 143 women, and 84,000 children. They estimate afterwards 42,000 died with mines. 3 million then died as a direct result of Agent Orange. You know, does that sound like nice people? Do they sound like the good guys? Yeah, we didn't even learn back in the 1970s. And then when I was writing this speech, I could have gone on for ages about it, but I'm going to focus on 3 key events in US foreign policy and what they do. The NATO bombing of Serbia, and then the war in Iraq, and then the removal of Gaddafi in Libya. In 1991, the Soviet Union collapsed. There was no need for NATO. There should have been global peace. We could have had a safe and prosperous world. They promised that there would be no eastward expansion. But what did they do? They pushed east. They kept doing that because you know why? There's too much money to be made in war. Then, In the the late 90s, there was an obscure conflict began in the Balkans. It was complicated. Do you know what NATO did to Serbia? 2,300 missiles, 14,000 bombs, depleted uranium shells, cluster munitions. They destroyed 25,000 houses. They destroyed 69 schools. Do you know how many kids died in Serbia because of NATO bombing? 81 children, including an 11-month-old child called Bojana Josevic on the 11th of April 1999. That's what the US empire did in the Balkans. They'd never caused any trouble. Then on September the 11th, we witnessed the devastation in New York. And that was the first time in human history where a building collapsed in on itself because some fires had been let off. But I'm not going to go down too far on that road. The official narrative was that September the 11th was Sunni Wahhabist extremists led by Osama bin Laden, who had an extensive cave network and military equipment in northern Pakistan. So what do you do in those circumstances? Well, you launch an invasion of Afghanistan, don't you? And then you start telling people that Saddam Hussein was secretly behind it. Saddam Hussein was the leader of a secular party, the Ba'ath Party, that throughout the Middle East was actually against Islamist extremism. He was anti-clerical. And then, what happened? Who was the Prime Minister at the time? A certain Tony Blair. We all remember Tony Blair, don't we? He was a poodle of George Bush. Tony Blair that also pushed the country. And then look at it now. He was an expert on bombing countries in the Middle East. Now he's an expert on pandemics, isn't he, and digital ID. So what did they then do based on their lies? 15 minutes. I mean, did you see today? Apparently Putin's ready to attack the UK, according to the Telegraph. Remember, Saddam was 15 minutes away from a launch. It is all lies. It is all garbage. And what did Operation Iraqi Freedom look like? 280 to 300,000 civilians killed during the conflict. 500,000 were already killed before as a result of the sanctions. It was an absolutely bloody and brutal conflict. And then what did George Bush say when he went on the naval ship? What did I have in the background? Mission accomplished. Well, what exactly did they accomplish? Death, destruction, profiteering. That's what they accomplished. And then in around 2014, you then had a series of uprisings called the Arab Spring, which were all lies. They were all done by the CIA, and they were coups to target President Assad and President Gaddafi. Can someone actually tell me what did Gaddafi or Saddam ever do to us? Now, I'm not saying that they were nice guys. I'm not saying that I would have them round for dinner and they would be my best friends. But what did they ever do to the people of this country? What they did do was they tried to go away from the US hegemony, and they were going to say, we're not going to use the US dollars anymore. So what did they do to Gaddafi? They launched a massive bombardment of Libya and they removed it. And what did Hillary Clinton say? As she's rightly known as Hillary Clinton. We came, we saw, he died. They executed a perfectly legitimate leader of a foreign country and nothing happened. What then happened after the fall of Libya? What then happened after the fall of Libya was that Europe was then opened up to tens of millions of migrants that nobody asked for, to fundamentally change the face of Europe beyond recognition from Syria, Lebanon, Sudan, Eritrea, everywhere. We constantly hear about democracy from the United States of America. We constantly hear that about them. Does anybody actually ever remember voting for any of this? No. Have we ever voted to be involved in the war in Iraq? Have we ever voted to be involved in Afghanistan? No. Have we ever voted to be involved in the Balkans? Have we ever voted to be involved in Ukraine? No, we haven't. Then in 2014, in Eastern Europe, you had the Euromaidan revolution, which was an ultra-violent, ultra-brutal by people who were extremists. And what did you have at the time? Victoria Nuland handing out sweets to thugs, people fighting with the police, fighting with authorities. You then had the annexation of Crimea. You then had the Minsk agreement signed, which was supposed to bring peace to the Donetsk and Luhansk regions. It was built on a lie. Everything about America, everything about NATO is built on a lie. You had Merkel and Hollande then admit that it was just a ruse to buy time to train and arm Ukraine. And we're going to be talking about this a lot more outside the MOD tomorrow at 12 p.m. So please, if you can, come along. We're going to have a good turnout. We've got good speakers. But during the last 2 years, an act of war has been taken against a NATO country. A NATO country has been attacked. That country should have immediately triggered Article 5 of NATO's self-defence treaty. But there was only a slight problem. It was the Americans that blew up the Germans' pipeline. Exactly. They blew up Nord Stream. Like, how unbelievable is this? An £11 billion, $11 billion, sorry, infrastructure project that was built between Germany and Russia was blown up by their own ally. Seymour Hersh has admitted it. This is insane. America is a terrorist state. That building represents a terrorist government. The only reason they get away with it is because of their money and because of their military. But this is coming to an end. So the foreign policy is just one aspect of their power. But be in no doubt, America, the United States of America, and I hate to have to say this, but it's the Republican and the Democrat Party as well. This isn't about the people of America who by and large just want to live in peace, but the regime is a corrupt, degenerate and amoral nation. It was a nation that sent tanks to Waco in Texas and burned innocent people in a church. Again, these people might not have been perfect, there might have been some bad apples there, but who does that? Every single day in America there's mass shootings, there's riots, but what do? They think they have a moral voice. They think that they have a moral voice to push what they think is right. And what does America push now? What is it they're pushing around the world? Let's put it in reality. What they're pushing around the world is the mutilation of children. Young girls given double mastectomies. And I'm going to talk about that in a wee bit more detail, the figures behind it. But that's what America pushes now. Degeneracy, immorality. Does America sound like the United States of America sound any more like a vibrant or healthy society? But this isn't just a sickness in the USA. It's a sickness of the Western world. But it's a sickness that the US regime exports. But you know what? The reality is, and it can't come quick enough, the rest of the world's had enough of them. And the Biden regime and the uniparty regime, they've had enough of their military, they've had enough of their economic, and they've had enough of their culture imperialism being rammed down their throats. But the whole thing as well is it's all coming to an end. And, you know, people might say, oh, people have been saying that for a long time, but this time it's real. Because American power is all built on the US dollar. Okay? Because the US dollar is the global reserve currency. It allows them to print infinite amounts of dollars out of thin air to buy cheap goods from abroad and keep them in a lifestyle and keep funding like this behemoth. I mean, what is this thing? Oh, it's an embassy. People are queuing up to get visas. Look at it. Yeah. What is this? Do you know that in the last 2 years, the amount of dollars in existence has gone up 80%? They've printed incredible amounts of money to fund their lifestyle. But the rest of the world's had enough. The rest of the world's had enough of them abusing this privilege. And you know, I just want to talk about that, and they're gonna stand up against it. But what does modern America look like? Listen to this, and I said this earlier. Last year, 42,000 children diagnosed with gender dysphoria. That's not a normal, healthy society. 600 shootings. How many of them were organised by the US government? Who knows? Each day on there's average 2 years. It doesn't sound like a healthy society. 60% of US adults are living paycheck to paycheck. They can barely afford to put food on the table. Does that sound like a rich, healthy society? In 2024, the Biden administration have announced a budget for the US military of $842 billion. That's $100 billion more than in 2022. The Department of Defense spends a year $2 trillion. They have over 1,000 bases around the world. The United States of America, as it currently stands, is a criminal terrorist enterprise, and that's me being generous about them. They talk about freedom. They talk about exporting freedom, that, oh my goodness, we couldn't end up like China, where you have a social credit score system, and if you say the wrong thing, you might end up in jail. They jail people in the USA and they jail people in this country for putting the wrong posts on social media. They arrest them in jail. As we stand here today, I'm not even allowed to say his name as a journalist, but Julian Assange rotting in Belmarsh prison because we, as a poodle of the United States of America, allows it to happen. Julian Assange, who exposed what they were, an absolutely criminal thing. In America, they talk about a free and impartial media to hold them to account. Have you ever watched CNN? I mean, do you see the USA as a free and impartial media? They talk about democracy. They talk about their democracy. Do you actually think they have a free and fair electoral system in the USA? Do you think elections are valid? Do you think people like Nancy Pelosi, Kevin McCarthy, Adam Schiff, people that all became politicians on salaries of maybe $100,000 a year, they're all multi-millionaires. There's something certainly going wrong somewhere. And that's the US regime, whether it's Republican or whether it's Democrats. It is a bully. And the one good thing about what happens to bullies is they fall eventually. The United States of America is not a shining city on a hill, as Ronald Reagan said it isn't. The United States of America sits atop a pile of rotten, dead bodies, killed by their regime around this world. And you know what? I look forward to it falling, and so should every decent person, because the time is coming soon. Thank you for coming today, and I'll see you all tomorrow outside the MOD at 12 p.m. Thank you.